evening. Good to have you with us in the 9 p.m. edition of the Urban Debate. Because in times of a pandemic, in times where the economy has been down and out and is now just about beginning to move upwards, in times where because of repeated lockdowns and whatnot, we've seen massive job loss, uncertainty, loss in businesses. What becomes important is the government support. The government schemes, government initiatives in the short term to provide the essentials to people and food, money, whatever is needed to the vulnerable of our section. And then in the medium term, come up with schemes to give respite to the businesses such that they can continue working, they don't shut down, and such that people continue to get employed. You also look at some of your existing schemes and you strengthen them to ensure there is enough employment and people who do not get employed get certain amount of money such that they don't die of hunger. One of those schemes that we've had in our country for employment generation and has actually worked quite well in the UPA era and in the NDA era has been the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, or the MNREGA as it is known as. The MNREGA Act ensures that there is a certain amount of funds which are allocated by the government for employment generation and wages to be paid to people for a certain amount of days that they work on government projects. And this is largely used in rural sectors. It's a huge benefit and respite, especially when times are tough. When other opportunities dry up, many look towards the scheme, enroll, and which is what we saw even during the times of the pandemic. Last year, massive enrollment took place as people lost their jobs in the cities, went back to their villages. They all enrolled for some kind or any kind of work under MNREGA or some amount of wage payment by the government. Right now, this MNREGA scheme is facing a major problem of cash. It's a cash crunch, which is why we wanted to bring this issue to you. Not often discussed, but it's important because if the MNREGA scheme stops working properly with 4 more months to go before the end of this financial year, it is going to impact the people living in our rural areas. It is going to impact the money that they have. It is going to impact their spending power and have a larger impact also on the economy. The MNREGA scheme essentially guarantees 100 days of wage employment in a year, guarantees wage employment for rural households, and individual beneficiary-oriented work can be taken up once you enroll for it. Employment is actually provided within 15 days once you put in an application, and in case you don't get work, there is some amount of allowance that is paid. And largely this work is done focusing on economic and social empowerment even for women. So not just for men but also women, and that's how it empowers the rural households. Now let's talk about how much shortage we are currently talking about. A large percentage of our states have run out of funds. There are some who still have some amount of money left for the rest of this financial year. Others are completely dried up. The total availability of funds was about 7,788 crores. And so far the expenditure has been about 78,000 crores. There is also pending dues, people who need to be paid under this scheme, that goes to about 10,000 crore rupees. So technically, if you see, basis what is left and what needs to be paid, we're pretty much dried up and in the negative. Some of the states have some funds, others have absolutely nothing. This issue actually cropped up some time ago as well. A few weeks ago, this issue did crop up. Some of the states raised an alarm about it, and the government did allocate additional funds, so they released additional funds to some of these states. But I don't know what's happened, and the experts can perhaps help us understand that. But even that amount of money has come and gone, and the balance sheet at the end of it still doesn't look very assuring. So tonight, let's speak about this. Let's talk about why this is important, what the government should do, and if the government doesn't, what can be the impact. I say good evening to Anshul Avijit, National Spokesperson for the Congress Party, Nikhil Dey, social activist, joining me this evening, Dr. M.J. Khan, Chairman for the Indian Chambers of Food and Agriculture, Dr. Bura Gaur, former MP with the TRS, and Dr. Sameer Kagalkar of the BJP joining me right now. Dr. Kagalkar, let's start off with you. If you can help us understand how important it is for the government, and do you think it should be for a government to treat this as a crisis situation?
Good evening, Tanvi. Thanks for having me on the show. Absolutely said, a situation which is extremely dire in the last 2.5 years that we have seen since the onset of the coronavirus, the kind of impact that the economy has taken, and the impact on the individual people in terms of health, in terms of their welfare, and so on and so forth, jobs, employment, so on. The government is very much seized of the fact that there is an issue that needs to be addressed multi-pronged, not just about one prong, but multi-pronged. For instance, as I rightly pointed out at the beginning, the immediate point of priority for the government was to ensure that no one dies of starvation, not even a single person dies of starvation. Months together, free ration has been ensured to make sure that the bare basic requirement of any poorest of the poor man is taken care of. That said, when you're looking at this particular initiative, the scheme, which is something extremely important at two levels. I mean, anyone who's done a bit of Keynesian economics understands that this would help definitely in terms of even reviving the economy, therefore is required. Beyond that, and more important than that, it has a very strong social phase, a human phase, and therefore that needs to be supported at all costs. What is the government of India under Modi's leadership doing? Prime Minister Modi has been very categorical, so is FM Sitaramanji last year, when the fiscal deficit hit almost close to 9.5 to 10. And in this year as well, when it's been budgeted to be in the range of 6, the fact is very clear. We are willing to open the purse as much as the demand, as much as the situation so demands. Last year, we have seen, for instance, while the allocated was probably in the range of about 61,500 crores, when the situation so demanded, it was increased way up to 1.11 lakh crore kind of a thing. Even now, the budgeted figure required an additional top-up. 10,000 crore was given in the month of November, and situation so demands more, which we are seeing is the case. The government will not hesitate to top it up and ensure that the scheme runs strongly for the cause of social welfare. The government is very much on it and supporting it by all means.
In fact, the government's official stand in terms of a justification given is to say that the MNREGA is a demand-driven. Additional funds are requested and they are given as and when needed. But it is not so often that we see this kind of a dire situation and a situation that is allowed to continue, for beyond a few days. Let me actually try and understand what impact can it have and what benefits or impacts does the MNREGA scheme have on ground. Mr. Nikhil Dey, good evening to you. If you can help our viewers understand why it's important and why we're talking about it tonight.
Yeah, so firstly, this is a law. It's not even a scheme, it's a law. And there is a legal requirement. Dr. Sameer talks about the government's commitment, but commitment matters in money. This is one law that does not say that you can be budget constrained. It is one law that says that depending on demand, as many people who demand work up to 100 days employment have to be given within 15 days and have to be paid within 15 days of their work being completed. And we must understand, all of us, that for them, any day of delay is a very dire circumstance for them. The fact that we have crores of workers not being paid within 15 days, the fact that we have 10,000 crores in negative balance shows that people are desperate for work. They are coming for work. We have a second year of pandemic crisis, which Dr. Sameer agrees with and even the government agrees with. And people are coming. They have already worked and they are not getting paid. So what we are doing is actually, the Supreme Court has called it forced labor, a violation of Article 23, and that is what is continuing day after day. Since September, civil society groups and people working with MNREGA workers have been raising this issue, saying 95% of the funds are finished. And we are getting in little drips. 10,000 crores was more was given when there was already more than 10,000 crores due. And as your own figures show, today the net balance is minus 10,000 crores. Now that means that people are sitting there waiting. That is the amount that they are waiting for their wages. If you cannot get paid on time in NREGA, NREGA does not give you benefit. Now, our idea that NREGA is only some kind of dole is itself misplaced. NREGA, as your pictures show, does a whole lot of small rural infrastructure work. It makes sure that you can have regeneration of water in your wells. Maybe in place of one crop, you'll get two crops. It makes sure small hamlets get connected by some kind of road connectivity. So this idea that it's only digging holes is also very, very misplaced. But as you said, women are the bulk of the workers. It is one place where women join the workforce. They get money into their bank accounts. They are able to go straight to the market. But if you don't have money, you don't have MNREGA. If you do not have a guarantee of employment when you demand it and do not have a guarantee of wages paid when you have finished your work, then your guarantee is gone, your legal guarantee is gone. And that's why it's not even an argument of market or anything else, it's an argument of law. It is the law of the land that has to be followed. Enough money must be there in advance. Last year, cutting the budget by 35% made it obvious that the government knew they were going to run out of money 8 months into the program, 7 months into the program. The government should have made huge provisions of money even now. And if you look at last year, 1,11,000 crores was spent. That is correct what Dr. Samir said, but 17,000 crores was there in unpaid balances at the end of the year. In other words, you needed 1,30,000 crores last year, and you allocated 73,000 crores, almost 60,000 crores less, because there's inflation every year, there are more expenditure. So it's a very dire situation for crores of workers. The last thing I'd like to say is that we found the money to give government servants 28% DA, 28%. We found money to give them 3% bonus. And we do not find money for the people that we have employed as a state all over the country, who are the poorest of the poor, who are people who are recovering, trying to recover, who are trying to get money into their homes, who are not just trying to survive. They are actually generating and regenerating the rural economy. And they are people who, once they can get a little bit, they can come back to their work in urban areas. So we are doing something very damaging to our economy. We are doing something very damaging to the people of the country, and we are violating the law.
You know, one very important point that you raised, I mean, thank you for that answer, because several interesting facts, and to emphasize on the fact that this is the law. MNREGA is an act, and thereby it's a law, and the government is mandated to ensure this happens. Is important to highlight. But also important is to say this is not a dole. This is not just a freebie or handout of money that you're just giving in the hands of people. They're going to be working for it. It is their right. And in 2020 and 2021, we're staring at times where already there is so much of distress in terms of employment. It should be a scheme where you step up on it, because that's the best way to empower people and give some money in the hands of them while making them work for it, rather than dishing out any other kind of a dole. Dr. Khan, where do you think we are then going wrong here? Does the argument work that it's a demand-supply thing? If we need more funds, we will allocate those funds?
I think you can look at it from both the perspectives. One, that the demand for labor still exists, because the people who had gone back from urban areas, they have still not returned fully. But the other side of it is that there is a substantial growth in farm production, creating enormous employment opportunities for the rural workers. So therefore, the situation which was 6 months back distressful, which is not there today, similarly, return to the urban area, return to the factories, to the production units has started. So the reverse situation which was there of the migration, that has come back to the normal day situation. So therefore, when it was needed, the government pumped in that kind of money, it was there. So today, in terms of figures, one may look at it, there is a reduction, a drop of 38,000 crores of rupees, and there may still be demands coming from the states. However, the situation on the ground is not that distressful, because the agriculture is opening up a lot of opportunity, the farming, the agribusiness operations, and also the factories are opening up. So therefore, I think with little reduced budget also, sufficient scope for employment of the rural workers is there. So therefore, I believe that it can be looked at from the perspective of economy returning to the normal situation. and therefore little positive spirit that is prevailing in the rural areas. So it's not a very distressful situation if you look at the reports on the ground.
Okay, so you're saying it's not a distressful situation. In fact, it can be read as the fact that there is some kind of a revival, but also, like you pointed out, a lot of these people who are out there looking for these jobs and are enrolling are the ones who've lost their jobs in other parts and are thereby having to turn to this MNREGA option that is available. Anshul, let's bring you in because it also ends up becoming a debating point between states and the center. I was looking at the data and it's interesting because there is no clear trend here in terms of who is getting it more and who is not. States with most funds right now: Telangana, Uttar Pradesh, Orissa, Assam, Nagaland. States with least funds or negative net balance actually: West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. But what's going on? Why are we not able to bring the states and the center together on this to resolve it on a faster basis?
First of all, tell me, congratulations to you. I'm really thankful to you to highlighting this particular issue, because what MNREGA does is what other things can't do. It tells us about the health of the rural economy. It's really a proxy for rural joblessness, for poverty, and for rural distress. And as we can see, I completely disagree that it's not a distressful situation. The rural sector in this country, for lack of better data, and this is the only data we can get, and there's one other data, which is the sale of two-wheelers, which points to the fact that the rural sector is in extreme amount of distress. And the government at this point of time has slashed its budgets. It is said that, actually they've given a grant of 10,000 crores additional grant. That was announced on 5th of November. But as far as I know, that hasn't reached the states as yet. Their balance sheets are still in the red. And they're in dire states because of this. And I'll tell you what the problem is. This is a lifeline. This is the difference between actually surviving and starving. This is actually, a social security. This is many, many things. It's something also that the Prime Minister ridiculed on the floor of the House, but we'll forget that. Mr. Kharge pointed that out again and again, because that remains the attitude of this government. And that's why it slashed the budget massively by about 35%. The problem with budgetary allocation of MNREGA is that the budgets are fixed according to last year's budgets with a nominal sort of increase in that. It doesn't go by, the actual expenditure and the budget and the revised expenditure during MNREGA. So therefore, you have massive shortfalls year after year. Also, most of the budget is actually about liabilities of previous years. So we haven't even begun talking about payment of this year itself. The other third point which I want to highlight is that there is a delay in payment according to the rules of this act. And I'm glad that the emphasis on act has been specified. According to the rules of this act, if there is a delay in payment, if the central government does not transfer the money directly to the bank accounts of the workers, after 15 days, there is also a compensation. We are not even talking about that. We are talking about minimum amount of money that has to be given. There has been, as we know, a reverse migration at the time of COVID in the last 2 years. The government knew of this. I don't agree that the people have gone back because urban joblessness is massive, and that would have shown a decrease if there was some kind of reversal in that stream. I believe that they're there. There is disguised unemployment in the agricultural sector. The agricultural sector, of course, is giving a lot. They've shown an increased amount. But, for something that employs 40% of our workforce, if it only contributes 15% to our GDP, we know that there's too many people there, right? So that is also in distress at the moment. Therefore, I think that this kind of joblessness is really, really critical for understanding what is going on in our rural sector. There is no data at all which is coming out from there. This is the entire health of our unorganized sector which is at stake over here. Now, people can gloat over the Q2 figures which have just emerged. 8 core sectors doing very well. People are saying demand has picked up a little bit. They're saying that, production, industrial production and investment is also picking up. But what is the data which is coming out of an unorganized sector, which employs 93% of our workforce and actually has about 50 crore people? We don't know about that. Right? So this is the only barometer, and it is in an exceedingly extreme amount of distress at the moment.
Well, let me also point out that, what often doesn't get highlighted, but there are instances of people coming together and actually protesting and trying to get the government's attention. There was a large group of construction workers and other MNREGA registered workers who protested just a few days ago in Shimla. And there is the issue of how their entire registration process itself was stuck and wasn't going through. There was another protest that I saw which actually took place in Muzaffarpur in Bihar. And again, hundreds of these people who came out got together simply demanding work. Just about when, Dr. Gaur, just about when we are beginning to see some uptick in economy, if we are going to ignore this large workforce which is out there waiting for work, what would be the impact of this and how will the states deal with it?
Tanvi, first of all, it's a very, this MNREGA is one of the very ambitious and a very large social measure, as I think initiated by the PV Narasimha Rao, but later on implemented during the UPA 1. See, as you know, India is a very complex country, ranging from the technology giants to the with a minimum per capita income in the world. So in this, if you have seen the pandemic time, actually the rural agriculture has saved us, because the farmers and the agriculture laborers combinedly has saved the country from the starving, because there was no shortage of the food. Our FCA Gaudans are full of the food. This is not come up suddenly. It has not come up suddenly. It has come up because of the various measures various government has taken to strengthen the rural economy. Because ultimately, when you are hungry, you don't eat currency notes or you don't eat shares. You eat only food. So that's what it is. And second thing is, MNREGA has provided a it's like a safety net. When you don't have a work, you don't have to go hungry. You can work till you get enough minimum, at least. If it's not 200 or 250 rupees per day for 100 days, I don't say it's a very huge amount, but at least it prevents you from suffering the hunger, or at least keep the family going on. So that kind of. And second thing is also, MNREGA does not mean only payment for the these laborers, agriculture laborers or any other laborers. It is 60% of funds are for the laborers, 40% is material. So the 40% contributes also to the rural sector infrastructure development, like ACC roads or bunds of the tanks and various things. So it is not as if 100 rupees you spend 100 rupees are going into the pocket of poor laborer. 40% is going for the again material. I think the government of India also should think any investment in this is not waste. And second thing is, it's a complex issue, because like a Telangana state, and may not be comparable to the Bihar, UP, because most of the laborers, migrant laborers come from that state to the Jharkhand, Bihar, UP to our state.
Right.
We have a peculiar problem. Our economy is booming, the agriculture economy booming, and we are not having a labor market. It's extremely difficult for farmer. So we want this, because we, as a MP also we have argued, the MNREGA somehow should be linked with the farming exclusively, so that, because farmers are ultimately suffering. Now it has become a farmer who is 5 acres of land. For him to do a labor job is more lucrative than do a farming. I have seen my own eyes in the farming season. Sometimes the farmer gives a lease. Okay, you take 70% and leave me 30%. That kind of situation is also there. It's a very complex, but anyway, MNREGA is a good scheme. We have to use it, and we have to use it and link up to the agriculture and infrastructure development. And the MNREGA, there was a criticism that it is trying to make the labor shortage wherever it's required. And if at all there is such a situations are there, it should be relooked at every year. I think that's my opinion. And Telangana state is one of the states which has used most of the MNREGA, either for the job cards as well as infra development. And we have a zero corruption in the implementation of this scheme. After the DPAT and judicial payment, I think earlier, probably a few years back, there was a problem of leakage of the funds.
Right.
I don't know about other states, but I can watch my states that leakage is not there because of the DPT. The funds are going into the pockets of the poor.
Well, there has been much concerted efforts by several governments, including the NDA at the center, to plug these leakages and ensure that the benefit directly goes to the people who are meant for it. But Dr. Kagalkar, do respond to a very interesting issue raised by Dr. Gaur about linking it to agriculture and also what Anshul was saying earlier.
Yeah. Looking at the entire thing, one needs to sort of really understand it dispassionately and objectively to try to understand that in an ideal steady state economy, if anything, these kind of initiatives must be the very, very lastest resort.
Yes.
In that case, it obviously automatically means that the economy, the people are finding job elsewhere, lucrative jobs, which is sufficient for their efforts, and they are fairly satisfied with the kind of work that they've been doing. Of course, they have the ambitions and progressions, but there is no direness of the situation so that they come back to a situation where they have to be given a guaranteed employment kind of a thing. But that said, given the very complexity of the country that we are in, the kind of a complexity of the three sectors, agriculture being predominantly employing more number of people while contributing very little to the GDP, as rightly said. So is the case with the service as well as the manufacturing sector, and with the regional imbalances as well, taking into account a lot of migration and reverse migration, the situation is deeply, deeply complex. So that said, what is it that we have to be doing? Let's say if you look at the last 24 months, you look at a situation wherein there was a sudden crash in the economy due to the lockdown. Then there was a repeat situation, second lockdown, the people had to sort of go back. They were out of jobs for a couple of months altogether. The situation so demanded that the government completely support them with an unprecedented free ration. All these things point to one thing, that the government is seized of the matter and is with the poor people. That said, what is it that the government is trying to do in terms of making sure, allow me to complete, making sure that the economy bounces back and therefore the people very fairly well in the market situation gets a good amount of job. There are some parameters, though that it may not be the completeness quotient, as Mr. Avik pointed out. Sorry if I got the name wrong. As my Congress friend spokesperson pointed out rightly, that it cannot be complete. But that said, if you look at the kind of the GST collection, 2 months back to back, 1.3 lakh crores. It points to a situation wherein the economy is fairly solidly bouncing back. Since last Deepavali, except probably a month of June, we never dipped below 1 lakh crore GST collection. And if you look more importantly at the kind of a focus of the government, what is it? Putting tons and tons of money on the capex part of it. For example, the last year's budget spoke of a massive, unprecedented 5 lakh crore plus on the capex part.
Dr. Kagalkar, I understand, and I'm not questioning or debating right now about the efforts being taken by the government to push and restart the economy.
Exactly. Allow me 30 seconds more to link this back to what my co-panelists have been talking of, right? So that said, when you're talking of the economy reviving, naturally there's a situation wherein you do expect, when you're doing the budget, that there will be a fair amount of people going back to their earlier job. Therefore, this being a demand-driven situation, if there is a more demand, the government is committed to give, to top it up, and that's what it's been doing, right? So there's no running away from the fact that there's no lack of commitment. Both have been established fairly well in the last few months and probably a year plus. Now we are talking of the economy reviving or not reviving. You can have a different discussion altogether. While the State Bank of India's research last week.
So here is the point. Okay, I understood what you're saying. Here is the point. Firstly, I will object to the fact, to the use of the phrase economy is bouncing back. It's not bouncing back by any metrics right now. Yes, it is improving. But let's remember, Dr. Kagalkar, we were already at a very low level before the pandemic hit us. We had slowed down significantly when the pandemic hit us, and then our economy contracted 24%. And after that, right now, we're looking on that, at that level. If you say you're growing 7% and 8%, we're going to take some time to get back to the levels where we were. And then we can start talking about a great economy. Until that happens, do you think it is fair to cut down on, options like MNREGA? Up until we can actually see a booming of jobs across cities, across different sectors, can you really afford to cut down on MNREGA?
It's not being cut down, Tanvi. I mean, you're unnecessarily pointing a finger when none deserves it. The fact is, it's been budgeted based
26 states have a negative balance as we speak today, have run out of funds. What is this then?
Tanvi, the same kind of a similar situation we had a debate some 3.5 months ago. Only 1 day, 1.5 day worth of coal pertaining is what the kind of a debate that we went. We have seen that. We have seen that in the case of vaccinations. We have seen that in the case of coal. That said, let us be very objective. The government stays committed, willing to talk up, and it's doing. As simple as that.
Okay, because and I also want to highlight that, and I'll come back to you on the aspect of your party's larger view on this. I know you touched upon it. When you came to power in 2014, there was a stronger view of reducing schemes like MNREGA. In fact, you had, and the BJP had very, very scathing commentary to make about this scheme then. That view changed gradually. And a little before the 2019 elections, you in fact started stepping up on the spends. Maybe you recognize the impact and the benefits of it. Maybe it was just the political benefit you were looking at. So we will come to the merits of the scheme in just a bit. But before I get Anshul Avji to respond to it, Nikhil Dey wanted to come in. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I want to say that we can do a whole lot of speculation about how the economy will bounce back, is bouncing back, how decent the situation is in rural areas, how few people or many people are coming or not. What we have been talking about in this program is not in the area of speculation. It's hard fact. It is hard fact that there are people who have gone to work who are not being paid. It is hard fact that if any of us in this panel did not get paid in time, we would be up in arms about. And here is a law that says that you have to be paid within 15 days, And it says that you, as was pointed out, that you must get compensation, even that is not being paid. And just to repeatedly say that, of course, the government is committed to it, the government will do it. The commitment shows if you put enough money into it. It was clear from the beginning that the money was not enough. It is clear that there are crores of workers. On the day of Diwali, there were 8 crore transactions, means payments that had not been made on Diwali. Can you imagine that in a country like India for the poorest workers, that's where we are? And the last 3 months have been torture for these workers. You talked about the protest. That's a very, very good thing that you did, because actually people are extremely distressed. You can imagine the number of times that they are making. Think of them in those human terms, where they are repeatedly going to the banks and saying, has our money come? Going to the BDO's offices and saying, has our money come? Going to the state governments and saying, has our money come? And this has a very, very terrible effect on MNREGA itself, because you squeeze the money. The state governments then don't want to provide employment on demand, because they have to face the music when people don't get their money paid on time. So even though people are desperate, they are coming to work. And if we don't understand, people would not come to work if they had lots of other alternatives available. They are coming to work, that's a fact. They are not being paid in time, that's a fact. The states have less money, that's a fact. The vast majority of states have less money, that's a fact. Chief ministers have written to the Prime Minister, that's a fact. Economists, 80 economists wrote to the Prime Minister saying, please give NREGA enough money, that's a fact. So it's a simple, straightforward thing. The law requires you to give much more money in advance so that there is never a shortage of these funds. And it is not to be budget constrained at all. So just repeating that the government is committed to it is actually pulling the wool over the eyes of everyone else. Those in this program don't go to MNREGA works, but we have to understand that we cannot just keep repeating that, yes, we are committed to it and the rest of the economy is doing well. That speculation can take place separately. This is something that has to be done. And if it's not going to be done, then there must be consequences for not following the law of the land.
Yeah, and you know what you said. Even a single day, even if it's for a single day, that the wage is not paid, the job is not assigned, it's a big thing for that household. It's a big thing for that individual. This is not our constant everyday job. When in cities we go to work every day and come back and we work 365 days. This is for a limited number of days, which is very important to them to bring that money in to earn a livelihood for the entire family. So that pain has to be kept in mind when we simply talk about, okay, these are regular government delays or bureaucratic hurdles and they will be fixed, just a little bit of delay. That can't happen. I think that's the point that we must emphasize again and again. Anshul, go ahead, please. You wanted to comment.
of course, we know it's an act, but the government has complete disregard for all acts, as we've seen, throughout the course of these couple of years, to be exact. This is more of a moral question. How can you cut down the budgetary allocation of MNREGA in a COVID year? It's inconceivable. So you saw those migrant workers walking home with a coffin on their heads. I mean, you saw it. So either you are completely incompetent or you're absolutely callous. And on the other hand, the inflation is skyrocketing. Core inflation is really, really high. You have consistently increased the excise duty of petrol and diesel and earned 23,000 lakh crore rupees. So you've got enough money for that. I don't know where it's going, but you don't have enough money. And the amount of money they have, it's absolutely shameless, actually. I'm actually at a loss of words. And when this thing came to light, I was sitting back and stunned that could this actually happen in a COVID year when there's so much of rural distress? My friend from the PJP, yes, he's talking about GST collections. He's spoken about very quickly, he's spoken about all this high frequency indicators, but we haven't spoken at all about the informal sector. What are the data coming in from that particular sector? We don't even know. Even the agricultural sector, and linking about agriculture with the informal sector, all the data which people are quoting at the moment, the NSO data, the household agricultural incomes being 10,000 and their loans having gone up from 47,000 to 74,000 rupees. The payments, daily payments actually have come down. All that is also 2 years old. The other data which people are quoting of the Shanta Kumar committee report is 2015. We don't even have enough data. And thank God, actually, and I was quite surprised that the Niti Aayog has actually brought out some kind of data on Indian poverty. I mean, that was a real surprise. I'm glad, there is some course correction which is being attempted. But as far as the informal sector is concerned, it's a huge amount of distress. We don't have enough knowledge about it. And this is actually the testimony to that. The other is two-wheeler sales. Entry-level two-wheeler sales have seen a precipitous decline over the past few months. These are the couple of indicators which show that this sector is really in need of money.
Dr. Kagalkar, please respond to that, and then I go back to our other two panelists. Yes, yes, and I'll go across to Dr. Gaud also. Yeah.
Absolutely, we are all on the same page saying that this is a human issue, issue that concerns the humanitarian dignity and the life and livelihood of the people. That's exactly the reason why the Prime Minister of the country ensured that the people, the poor people, have been given repeatedly months and months together of free ration, so that there is absolutely no discomfort, distress on that count. That said, I respond specifically to Mr. Dey. It's not a speculation saying that we are committed, we will commit it. I'm also talking of a hard fact where the budget amount was less when the demand was more last year. Additional 50,000 crores was given. The fact that when we say we stayed committed, we are also talking money, putting our money where the mouth, putting our this thing where the commitment is. So the fact is clear. If there is a situation that so demands, the government of India is willing, it stands committed by its action, by its money to the poor people. One last point on the unorganized sector part of it. Taking cognizance of this issue, the e-Shram initiative that's been taken to ensure that any unorganized sector person gets all the social welfare benefits, which otherwise was almost unthinkable. The fact this portrays only one point, that the Modi government is completely cognizant and sympathetic to the cause of the poorest of the poor man.
Okay, so let me ask you this, and because you've now repeated it multiple times, and the government is committed to, and as there is demand, we will bring in. What is it that the government, allocated a few days ago, 10 days ago, 10,000 crore rupees? That's the amount of pending dues. We still have 4 more months to go. Where is the plan that the government has for the rest of the 4 months?
Tanvi, it's so easy to sort of take one issue, slice and dice, and probably ignore the complete list of the whole issue. Allow me half a minute. We are talking of the GST devolution of the rights of the states, which the FM recently front-ended and gave it to the states in 2 tranches. We also need to realize the fact that the states need the dues, and it's the central government's duty to ensure that the dues are devolved in time. It was upfronted. Number 2, the states were, whatever was due to them in terms of the GST compensatory allowance, which could not have been done due to the corona thing, it's been further extended by 3 more years. So the fact is the central government has never said no to its commitment.
No, you didn't understand what I'm saying, Dr. Kagalkar. I'm not talking about the rest of the dues. I'm simply talking about MNREGA dues. I'm talking about the latest tranche, the additional funds that the government has sanctioned. Even the government knows those funds are not enough. You don't have to wait for another demand to arise to say, okay, further allocation of funds will be done basis the demand. The demand is obvious. You have 4 more months left in this year.
The commitment is very clear from the finance ministry that they are going to take care of each and every pie due. There's been no argument on that count. There's been no denial on that count.
Okay, Dr. Gaur wanted to come in. Go ahead, please.
Tanviji, first of all, I think it's a very important issue from the poor people, because for him getting a 2,000, 3,000 rupees in time for the work done is more important. I think from the debate, I expect the government of India to take a note and try to release, because there is a 10,000 infra project is there. If the funds are delayed by the 2 months, 3 months or 4 months, it does not make, ultimately the banks will suffer, not the person. But here the actual person, but the funds are in shortage is the reality. Only I request through the debate, the government of India take the cognizance of the fact and release the funds immediately, because this money is going in directly into the pockets of poor people, and that helps the economy also. That helps that family also, means that helps they are not going to keep in the some fixed bank. They are going to spend, and the spending helps in the economy recovery. Probably it will recover much better if you put another 50,000 crores into the small people pockets than the big people pocket. I hope that point is not debatable or any difference of opinion from the BJP spokesperson to the everybody. I think pending dues are fact, and that need to be cleared is the also reality.
Yes, and what is going to be raised as a demand as more people seek work, and the payment of wages in January, February, March also has to be kept in mind. Very quickly, I want to go back to the point that you had raised, Dr. Gaur, earlier, and let me bring in Dr. MJ Khan on it. The issue of exploring linking MNREGA and MNREGA funds to more on the agriculture and farming side.
Thank you, Tanvi. In fact, we have to look at from the perspective of the work opportunities available to the rural workers. Now, if agriculture is performing very well, so government need not to pump in more and more money to create the opportunities in rural areas other than agriculture, because if you see the ground level how this scheme works, unfortunately, it is to say that local level Pradhan and others, they collaborate in a way that only few hours work is done and the labor gets the payment. When farmer employs them, he has to get full work done. So the prices of labor for agriculture are going up and they are not willing to work for agriculture. That is one aspect. The second is that you'll have to look at the state after state. 2/3 of the states in the country, there's a labor shortage for agriculture. So this scheme is good for 1/3 of the country. And the third thing is that the government is pumping money in other schemes. For example, this Kisan Samman Nidhi with 6,000 rupees per farmer is going into the account directly, some 75,000 crores of rupees, plus the FPOs are being created, 10,000 FPOs. So a lot of opportunities are getting created now. If for some kind of rural infra project which are also of not permanent nature, it is like creating that, then dismantling, or after a year or two that gets away, whatever is done. So the cost of agricultural production is going up because of this scheme. So it runs contrary to the benefit of the farmers or to the interest of the agriculture. So this scheme, even though politically it is very profitable to talk about and catch the sentiments related to it, but cannot be allowed to continue forever. Because this may not have been the purpose of also when this was created. That was the time when the agriculture was under severe distress in 2004, 5, 6, 7. But the situation is rapidly changing. If the rural worker is getting employment in agriculture,
but the argument is, Dr. Khan, yes, but the argument is, Dr. Khan, that the farmers are not making money. The argument here is that the farmer is not making the money. There may be growth in the agriculture sector. Dr. Gaur just pointed out that the labor working on the farm may be making some money, and it may be more beneficial for him than the farmer who owns that small little piece of land. So to say that the agriculture is in a good state right now may be a little misleading.
That is another discussion. We can have a little separate discussion on that, whether farmer shares, farmer is getting proportionate benefit to the growth in agriculture. But the fact is that if agriculture is growing, there are work opportunities for laborers in the village itself. There may be debate whether the economy has come back to the normal situation, going by the growth rate and so on. So therefore, whether the factories have opened up and there is an opportunity in the urban areas and in the industrial sector for laborers to come back. But certainly the opportunity in the agriculture have gone up many folds, and there is a flow of money. If you look at how the agriculture credit have gone up by 1,50,000 crores last year, which means there is a lot of money that is flowing into rural areas, creating opportunities for the rural workers. So MNREGA itself needs not to be more money to be funded.
So you say MNREGA doesn't need to be the
to the interest of the agriculture in the rural area. Therefore, farmers are facing the severe crunch of the laborers in the to work on the farms.
Yes.
So if this scheme is dismantled, then probably farmers will be benefited more.
Well,
it is like that urea situation. If
they are facing also the labor crunch in states because most of those laborers were migrant laborers who went back, and the trauma of the first year of pandemic was so bad that many of them have not returned right now.
Fertilizer subsidies going down the drain. Everybody knows more use of urea is counterproductive to the interests of agriculture. However, if the prices are touched, the subsidy is reduced, there is a hue and cry by all political parties and all politicians. So that subsidy is going on. Similarly, if MNREGA, because of the sentiments, even though ground realities may be different, if everybody is on board to say that it must be strengthened, more money must flow in, it is not contributing to the either agriculture growth or to the economy. And when the job opportunity itself are expanding, so therefore government need not to create artificially more money to do something in the rural area just to keep
but
them
you will need,
engaged.
but okay, I agree with you, but you will need exhaustive data to come to the conclusion that it is not needed and everything is all good in the rural segment. It's exactly the same thought that you're reflecting here, that the current government came with when they first came to power. They changed their view. They stepped up on the scheme because they understood the ground reality when they came to power of what was happening. Two people want to make a point. Nikhil Dey, first you, and then we'll go to Anshul.
Yeah, I have a lot of objections, serious objection with the kind of assumptions that are being made here.
Yeah.
Firstly, NREGA workers barely get minimum wage. There are about 27 states in which they don't even get the minimum wage. It is the objection of the agricultural community just to save agriculture because agriculture is not profitable and squeeze the NREGA worker even more, squeeze the agricultural landless laborer even more by saying we will give them less wages is ridiculous. NREGA is one work on which payments are made as per work productivity. Even the wage rate of NREGA is not paid in most states because as much work as you do on a piece rate basis, that's how you get paid. And I think many of the gentlemen here who keep asserting that this is something that Mr. Khan says that it is something that you can dismantle the works should go and see what our rural infrastructure is like and what NREGA has done. And yes, we would like some very hard evidence to show that NREGA has done nothing at all. We would like to see which states, which districts that they have examined, how many works they have examined to show that NREGA is not producing productive assets. So much of it goes into that. So we are all wanting to say that the economy is doing very well. Yes, our top 100 people made 13 lakh crores last year during the pandemic. But do we not know that there were millions of other people who are suffering terribly? Are we only going to go by those kinds of economic indicators and look at our very affluent? Are we not going to look at the rights of the poor? When will we finally look at them? NREGA only said that people have a right to work, to 100 days work, to work.
Yeah.
And not to be paid free. And for that work for rural infrastructure in their own villages. Do we not care about that?
And bare minimum wages.
I would like all of these gentlemen to come and say that, okay, let's go and see a particular area where you say there NREGA is the one scheme that also has public audit and social audit. You can put all the information out in public domain. You can look at it. You can hold people to account. You can have cases against them. It's the one law that has that. So to make this, to completely say that, no, we should not help, then NREGA should not, government is doing nothing artificial, it's doing as per the law of the land. Surely, if we have rights to water and electricity and everything else, these are rights that people have as well. So this kind of analysis that government can decide when to do something or not, it cannot. It is the law. When people demand work up to 100 days, they're not getting 365 days. They must get work. They must get paid in 15 days. And there is no question about it. Otherwise, we have no government.
No, but so let me just turn it around to, because this is often the argument that is given, Mr. Nikhil Dey. which is to say, but what are you doing here? You're saying you're essentially establishing a system where people work for 100 days, make their money, rest of it, they get ration from the government, they get subsidies from the government, they get cash money from the government is making homes for them. So why is this working force then going to actually come to the cities or anywhere else to get a proper functional job, and hence the dole argument?
Tanvi, then let's starve them completely so that they come to the cities and work for you at a pittance. In all your factories and in all your contract works and in everything else, let's starve them completely.
No, and because I think it's extremely important to understand 100 days and not 365 days, and minimum wages, bare minimum wages. Nobody by choice would say, this is how I want to live the entire year because this is comfortable for me.
And it's payment as per piece rate, as per measurement.
Yes.
You don't even get their wage rate.
Yes.
Most states have an average rate of less than whatever the wage rate of MNREGA is. These are things that need to be understood, and crores of people are working at that. It's not some kind of dole.
Yes, absolutely. Anshul, last comment from you before we wrap this up.
No, exactly. I mean, I completely endorse those views. I mean, this is not populism. This is an existential program. It's a lifeline that is extended at the time of extreme rural distress. And furthermore, you're not even getting 100 days. The average amount of days per mandate you're getting is about 50, and some say even 26. So it's cut down even more. So imagine the amount of rural distress that is happening. You know, the government has not given any kind of fiscal stimulus throughout this crisis. What it has done is extended the meal scheme, and thank goodness for that, till next year sometime. And that was because of political reasons. But at least that is an acknowledgement of the nature of rural distress. If you increase this yojana of the Pradhan Mantri, so that is this. So this is supplements that. Even that you can't fulfill this kind of obligation. Then I mean, this contractual relationship in democracy that you have with the poor of this country, that you must protect them and protect their lives, is completely demolished. It's been completely destroyed. You have no right. There's no legitimacy here of this government.
Okay. Dr. Kagalkar, do you want to just, once again tell us where you stand on it? Is it something that can be done away at some point? What do you think is the basic purpose of MNREGA? Why is it that the government that believed it's not required, it's a scheme by the UP that's not really working, cut down on it, but again then went ahead, gave it a new avatar, gave it new funds, and continued all this while?
Allow me to sort of quote my own anecdotal experience with the government. I've been a very core part of Janaushadhi that was scaled up drastically from probably what it was 90 or 100 when the UPA handed over to us. In about 5 years, we ramped it up to 5,000 centers all across the country, and from about 100 medicines to about 1,200 medicines in the basket. It was started by Dr. Manmohan Singh in 2008, and there was no fact that said that the Prime Minister says, this is a scheme brought in by the previous government, we should not do it, or we should do something new. Anything that was good for the country, good for the poor, has to be picked up, scaled up, and efficiently done. That was his only mandate. What was true of Janaushadhi is true of anything else, be it MNREGA, be it any other good scheme that the previous government has done, has been bettered, done more efficiently, and as Mr. Gaud rightly pointed out earlier, thanks to DBT, without a 85% leakage. So that said, we reiterate the fact that the overall welfare of the poor, be it the urban poor, be it the rural poor, be it the unorganized, in terms of what we're talking of a social welfare measure through e-shram, or the free food grains, or the support in terms of pushing production and employment through the PLIs and the infrastructure mode.
Yeah.
100 crore. I mean, this is the vision.
Okay.
People are be romantic in their understanding and probably get into TV debates purely basis romanticism. We have no objection to it, but the hard fact remains the same, that this is the poor man who comes to vote, and he'll vote you out if you don't deliver. Okay. We are cognizant of that fact, as simple as that.
I will say, I'm not going to get into the last part of what you just said, because then we'll need another hour to continue this debate. But the fact that you did very honestly acknowledge the fact that there are many of the schemes from the previous governments that were good, that needed some amount of improvement and fixing, and you continued and added value to it, is not something that we hear very often. I do appreciate it, and I'm sure Anshul does too. A big thank you to all of you for joining me on this conversation. The fact of the matter is this, viewers, the MNREGA issue, especially this year, is not something that has cropped up overnight. For the last several months, This issue is being repeatedly flagged with protests on ground, with people raising issue on ground, with states raising the issue with the center. Funds were released, but the point of giving you this data today was to say the funds that the government decided to release a week, 10 days ago, is barely going to be enough to pay the pending dues. And then there is more. There is 4 more months left in this financial year. A lot of people still looking for their wage payments, for that work to be done under the scheme. The central government needs to move quickly on it. Thank you for joining us.